at the top of a mountain. It's January. It's 10 degrees out. I'm moving into this cabin, and tonight I'm lighting my wood-burning stove for the first time. I light the kindling and I watch with satisfaction as the smoke rises up into the chimney, but I have a bit of alarm in me as I notice that the smoke is not filtering out as quickly as I expect. A few minutes pass, and the bright orange flames embrace the dry cedar, and more smoke is coming into the house instead of up the chimney. A few minutes pass beyond that, and now I'm genuinely anxious, and I'm beginning to calculate, would I rather suffocate or freeze tonight? I decide I'm going to take my chances with freezing. So I open up the window, and in comes a blast of frosty, cold air, blowing out all the smoke. Now, I'm lying on the floor underneath the window, covered in all the blankets that I have, freezing in a remote, isolated cabin, surrounded by darkness, and quite frankly, terrified. I didn't get to this mountaintop by accident. I came here on purpose. For 10 years, I had been practicing and studying and living with spiritual teachers. I had practiced thousands and thousands of hours of meditation, and I wanted to go to the next level. I wanted to dedicate myself completely to the practice. And so, I quit my job, I gave away my worldly possessions, and I drove up to the mountain and built a cabin. For 3 months, I built this cabin. And as I was winding down in the final weeks, I started freaking out. Am I really ready to be alone up here by myself, with myself, in silence? Of all the things that I'd planned and all the things that I prepared, what I was least prepared for, what I was unexpecting, was the intensity with which I was going to face my fears. At first, it was a little blissful. I could feel the stress of my workaday life dissipate. And I could feel the agitation and anxiousness of day-to-day be replaced by stillness. But then in that relative silence began to arise these shut off and shunned aspects of me, pieces of me that I had put away for decades, pieces of me that I didn't like, that I didn't respect, that I didn't want, that I hated. They floated into consciousness. At first came my fear of failure. You're going to fail at this meditation. You're going to fail at this retreat. You're going to fail in life. That was followed by fear that I would be found out, that I'm not as strong as I would like people to believe, that I'm not as smart as I want people to believe. And then come bubbling up the deepest fear of all that took a hold of me. It wasn't fear of heights. It wasn't fear of the unknown, a fear of the dark. It wasn't fear of public speaking. That's secondary. It was the fear that I'm fundamentally unworthy. And that fear kept arising, and the fears turned into a choir of strange, bizarre sounds that sang in my head. And that choir sang my unworthiness and my incompetence. And that choir persisted, and I went from negativity to internal self-loathing and bending towards self-destruction. By the time March rolled around, I had been so beset by these voices, by these fears, that I was convinced that I was the lowest worm on the planet, that I had no value, that I was a leech taking from society and not giving anything. In this echo chamber of my mind, all that played out was the negative, self-destructive thoughts. And I came to a final conclusion as we were sitting in that cabin, in the darkness of my thought, that the best thing that I could do, the gift that I could give humanity, was to kill myself, was to end this experience. That was truly terrifying. I came to the mountain to find myself, not to kill myself. It was a real surprise. And I survived, clearly. I survived through grit, through courage, and through surrender. And it's courage that I want to expand on. Courage, Aristotle said, is the first of human qualities because it is the one that guarantees all the others. There are at least two good reasons why we will never be free of fear. Our biology and our psychology. Our brain processes experience through the reptilian system, the limbic system, and the neocortex, beyond the rational, forward-thinking, language-driven neocortex lies this complex of decision processes that is rooted in the 4 F's: fight, flight, freeze, and fornicate. With children. They're my own children. Fear in survival is the root of this brain process, and so it is that we have to move forward. We want to overcome these fears. We can not be rid of fear. Anyone who's trying to tell you that they can have you be fearless is trying to sell you something. They're selling you drugs, they're selling you services, they're selling you product, they're selling you religion. We will always have some fear. The issue is not how to be fearless, the issue is how to cultivate courage. And courage can be cultivated because it is as much a part of us as fear is. We all think that we have our unique fear, the fear of snakes or the fear of spiders or the fear of heights. But in reality, these fears come from a basic set of primary fears. Like primary colors, red, blue, and green that make up the rainbow, there are 4 primary fears. Fear of pain, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of humiliation. Pain is the fear that activates in us when we're concerned about discomfort on the one end or hurt or death all the way at the other end. Failure is the fear cluster that we deal with when we're concerned with our powerlessness and inability to accomplish things and having no control. Rejections are the fears of being unloved, pushed away, undesirable. And humiliation is the cluster of fears that we experience when we think that we are worthless or without value. These fears mix up to make your individual fears, and they can be dealt with collectively in a process that I'll describe in a moment. You're probably wondering what the good news is at this point. The first good news, as far as I'm concerned, was I didn't kill myself. The other one is that billions of people, each one of us, myself, we get to tangle with our fear every single day. It's part of the process. You cannot be fearless, but it doesn't have to be your master. I define courage simply as deliberately walking towards what you'd rather run away from. But before I get into the 3 steps for cultivating this fear, I want to talk about why courage is not what you think. It's our brains, you see, that are the culprits in this fear experience. Most of the fear is generated by the same powerful brain that can visualize and make up story. The fears that we have, the fears that we believe, are stories in our heads. Fear of the dark, fear of heights, fear of failure, fear of rejection. Even if I were to stand at the top of a 1,000-foot cliff and look way down, which sickens me just to do it pretending right here. It sickens me because of the mix of real biological fear and the story, the movie that's happening in my head telling me how horrible it is. So we can't think our way out of what we're thinking our way into. We have to have some other way. We have to have some other process. And I call this process feel, face, and embrace. When I was holed up in the cabin and I was gripped by my fears, they literally gripped me. The fear was a tightness in my throat and a ball in my stomach and tension in my neck and sleepless night and fatigue, all those things that made up the fear. I wanted to escape it. I wanted to avoid it. But instead, I trained myself to sit and be present to it, to feel the fear. The first step is to feel the fear. It is the physiological experience of anxiety that is so repulsive to us. We will do anything to avoid it. TV, busyness, extra work, relationships, drugs, drinking, exercise. We have found all kinds of creative ways to avoid the inevitability of the visceral, disgusting experience of fear. But if you can't feel it, you can't go beyond it. You have to stop the intellectual process and find a way to create a pause. Feeling your fear is a simple way that you can pause. And it can be done as simple as 3 breaths. You don't have to retreat for weeks and months into the cabins. You can do this in your office. You can do this in your car. When fear comes upon you, and it comes upon you often, simply breathe. Inhale. Exhale. For 3 cycles, and pay attention to the sensations. As you do that, you're creating a gap. In that gap, you're inserting choice. And from that choice, you cultivate the courage. Feeling it is the first step, then you have to face it. A few years ago, I got real weak. No amount of sleep was refreshing me. I couldn't get my energy back. No amount of sun could cover the paleness of my skin. And so at my wife's consistent urging, I finally went to the doctor. And she said, let's examine and find out what it is. So they took my blood, they tested my heart, they thoroughly examined my intestines, and ultimately came up with a diagnosis: iron deficiency anemia. As soon as you can name something, you can begin to deal with it. When something is unnamed, it's amorphous, there's no path forward. In naming, you begin a relationship. And by naming your fears, you can begin to have a relationship with the fears, which is the goal here. Not to eliminate it, not to escape it, but to have a relationship with it. As I sat and felt my sensations, first, just labels came up: angry, idiot, failure, rejected. The longer I sat with these words, the more they turn into sentences. I'm afraid that I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm afraid that I cannot accomplish my goals. I'm afraid that my life will be meaningless. When you can name it, you can tame it. It's not so amorphous and strange. And then you can move into what becomes the third and final step, which is to embrace it. Fear is a contraction. We get small. Embracing is an expansion. You get large. And at some point, you have to take action towards the fear. You feel it, you face it and name it, and then you step forward and you embrace it. Fear is our constant companion. We can't avoid it. We have to learn to relate to it. So what does it mean to embrace your fear? There are two ways that you're going to embrace the fear: with words and with deeds. When I was, again, alone, I wished I had somebody to talk to express what was going on inside of me. Inside the echo chamber of my mind, the songs just got denser and worse, and there was nowhere to externalize it. One of the great gifts of conversation is you can put out what's trapped inside of you, and through conversation, gain perspective, gain ideas, and talk to a safe person. What do I mean by safe person? A safe person is somebody who can listen with curiosity, not just jump to conclusions, judgment, or solution. You have a conversation with a safe person, you externalize it, and then you make a plan. And the plan can be quick and simple, the plan can be elaborate and nuanced, but you have to make a plan, and the plan is not to eliminate the fear, but to move towards it. You can move one step towards it, you can move 2 steps towards it, 10%, 20%. It's not about eliminating the fear. When you practice these ideas of feel, face, and embrace, in effect, what it provides for you is a pause button, a way to halt and slow down the inevitable churning process of the mind. What we really need is to move beyond the thinking in the future and back to the present here now. Everything you wish, everything you want, every transformation that you're engaged in is one step beyond your comfort zone. The comfort zone is painted, it's the boundaries of our ego structure. The ego is our sense of safety. The ego is our sense of self. And so in every turn, we have an opportunity to meet and challenge this boundary of the comfort zone. The pause button allows you to create space, and in the space you can put choice. Fear, as I said, is my constant companion, but at this point it is not my master. And that is a change in relationship over the years. Fear is the gatekeeper to power, to your vitality, your energy, your personal empowerment. This gatekeeper cannot be destroyed, cannot be banished, cannot be slayed, nor can you avoid this gatekeeper on an ongoing basis. You have to learn to relate, you have to learn to embrace, you have to have a partnership. In order to navigate our way through transformation, to overcome the barriers of fear and to cultivate courage, you must form a relationship. And like any meaningful relationship, thinking is not enough. Meaningful relationships, relationships that empower you to move forward, that surround you with possibility, are ones where you embrace, where you connect, and when you work together. And that is the only invitation for cultivating courage, not to escape, but to relate. Thank you.